let's move on. What we'll do now is, rather than tease everyone, let's get all the BLG thoughts out now, instead of, because we're going to be referred to them a million times with every other team otherwise. So let's do it right now. Nymera, start me out here. Like, I think people actually, again, this is how I know the JDG news like dominated too much of the discourse, is because it's like as soon as this move was announced, like Knight is actually coming to BLG and they're keeping these other players. I remember being like, look, I'm a bit out on the, obviously I love JDG, I'm sad at that, but like, this is almost like the next best thing you could give me. Like, this looks like a super team in itself. This looks fucking amazing. So like, I was hyped from day one on this one, and quite frankly, everything I've seen has only made it, they've only gotten better as they played each series, it feels like. What do you think?
This is the team which has absolutely adapted to the meta the best, as well as having probably definitely the best roster on paper too. They don't have Tabe anymore, so he's not the coach, which was a worry of mine in terms of what happens if the meta flips a lot. The map's changing a lot, the items are changing, what's happening with, all of the weird stuff. They have absolutely taken to the meta with Storm. I think they are the best early game team in the world right now. If you look at the way that they use winning waves in bot and mid lane for the first 3 levels, get into the enemy jungle and just mess with either dives or messing with the enemy jungler. Well, God, it was the first game they even played against Top Esports, first game in. And by the way, I think Top Esports might also be like a top 3 roster, by the way. Yeah. They dismantled them. Shun walks in as a brand, brand jungle, which is something which has come to priority. They popped it off straight out the door, invades into a Xin Zhao, invades one of the best early game junglers in the game, because they have dominant bot lane. And Knight really slots well into this playstyle where, Kira, something which you've talked about a lot in regards to, Knight will always trade his HP for an early shove if he can. Like, this guy will always get that done. Will he die for it sometimes? Yes. He will. But he's really, really good at wrangling wave control very early on and using that to then go support whatever's happening on the map. Now, the fact that Elk and On also get to fist fight you early on too and do this is just absolute gold dust for what's happening in this team. One of the things which... God, I can't remember who it was in interviews. It was a player saying this in interviews last year where they were saying, look, BLG are a really hard team to face because you know that regardless of the draft, every single lane is going to play like psychopaths. They're going to play super, super aggressively, regardless of the matchup, and then they're going to try and get every percentage out of that. Is it high risk? Yes, sometimes they will get blown out and the lane will start to fall apart. I think even Bin's had 1 or 2 games where he's kind of like been into an awkward counter pick and he's died. Did he play against I think he played against a Darius one game. Yep. And he got a bit blown out there as the Udyr, and that was a bit awkward. But like the fact that Knight is now playing this style as one of the more mechanically competent players, ever to play his goddamn role. Is he a laning specialist? No, I wouldn't say that's necessarily where he works out, but he's an incredible snowball player and very, very good at finding openings in the early game after a gap in the armor has been shown, after you've been shoving your lanes in. Shun is also probably the best jungler in the LPL at using early pushing lanes too. So everything is aligning for this team. And the fact that bot lane still has a massive handle on what they're doing in the bot lane picks too. They've got incredible mastery over the current laning dominant picks and bot side. Like, this team is so fun to watch, and they've got a complete understanding of how they want to play it. I guess the one criticism I've got is that you're kind of not really using Bin at all. Bin's just there playing like Cassante and Udyr. There was like one game where he was... What was the game where he was like 0-0-0 at 20 minutes? No, just poor guy. We know how good a carry Bin is. But that's... AL. Yeah, against Anyone's Legend.
They had already won the game. There was 12 kills bot lane, and he was 0-0-0.
Yeah, so there's maybe some arguments there about, well, okay, maybe they just have to like pull that out later when the meta changes, and maybe there'll be drafts for that. But like, this team feels very much like a BLG or well, I guess more like JDG of last year, but they can play through any lane if they want to. They have the tools to do so. I guess the one other caveat I bring up is the games versus LNG. I don't really want to see Knight put on Karma duty. I get that it's a strong pick, just don't do that again. But like, this team is so exciting, and they are poised to be the best team in the LPL until, I don't know, we'll see what happens with JDG. I don't expect them to beat BLG, but upsets happen. But yeah, BLG right now, they very much look like the best team in the LPL.
Come on then.
Right. So, okay. I'll go from the top. So, like, Ben has actually had to do... I agree with Nivira. Ben's actually basically had to do nothing. They actually win the game independent of what, like, Ben's doing, except that they are one of the few teams that understand that, like, top lane, like, push... in terms of like grubs into like early game, like on the specific packs. So like, even though Ben's not doing anything flashy, the team understands that when Ben does have push, Jun is using that push to do something productive. I don't actually think Jun's the best jungler in the LPL. He still has like like flaws in terms of aggressive when being aggressive and moving forward and doing like productive plays like that. I think he is very, very good. I think he's like world's level. But on like defensive and like setups and stuff for like the team up for objectives, I still think there's like key weaknesses there. It's a blessing for June that like I too would love to have a mid laner never gank for it and it wins. We'll come. I'll come to Knight now. So like, but the other thing about June is it's amazing the fact that like he will just play all these carry picks. It is a speciality of June's is the fact that he has like a depth to all these like carry picks. He can play the Kindred at any given time. He can
Best brand in the LPL.
Yeah, Breath Band in LPL. He can actually play Rengar if it ever is required, Nidalee if it ever required. So he has Graves if it ever comes back into faction. There's a depth of play there for June that's, we've not even seen it yet, and they already look super dominant. So Knight looks like he just doesn't actually care at all. Like he looks like he's just having like a laugh, and he looks like a maniacal madman. He is like death pushing every single lane that he is in, and not caring whether or not he like dies or not. It's the most reckless I've ever seen Knight play in my entire life. There's like no control, like no like concern for like his like well-being whatsoever. And I think that's like something that like if he continues to do it, will actually end up getting like punished. Talk to Nymira about this. Knight has this weird property where if people opt to attempt to win the game through mid 2v1 or mid 2v2, it almost never works against Knight. Even if Knight's like 0-3 or like 1-3, or you're killing him a bunch of times and you put him behind, it never actually correlates to a game win. It's a very strange like property. I don't know why it is. I think I've not been able to like put like a science to it. It's just a pattern that I've noticed over a long period of like time.
Some of the Nico games are quite easy to tell, just because even if you put him behind, he kind of backs himself to make a big play just with the base kit, even if you don't have a ton of items on top of it. There's some games like that at least.
Yeah, like Nico and Annie I can understand because functionally, even if you're lots of goal behind, you CC a large, like a backline target and you kill them, and that gets you back into the game, or Ahri, you land key charms. Like, I can see it on those. So it's very, very like strange. I think he's playing amazingly well, and it's like in his like team fights and with gold leads, he still looks like the best player in the world. But would you call it like it is like his laning is like extremely reckless. It is very funny. I remember me and you were talking about this, Thorin, about like Knight. We're on to a complete new series of like picks, and Knight's going to be like the best player in the world on them. We have now went full circle. Corki is once again meta. Like if anyone wants to give Knight Corki, like you think Silas was bad, guys? Like I watched 2018 and 2019. Like give Knight Corki at your own detriment.
For the record, I hate LPL Corki. This champion is just not working in this region right now. Like Rookie's had a couple of games on it, but like I'm giving out like special Corki passes to players, and I've given it to like 2 people tops right now.
I think Knight's like one of the best Corkis I've ever seen. We'll see. It's the bot lane that I think is really came into its own on BLG. If I could give anyone props, it's this bot lane. This bot lane has played so fantastic. I actually can't believe how well they are playing. In particular,
I'm guessing.
What's that?
I'm guessing it's a revelation. There's a reason this guy was a meme on the old team. Like, he's definitely held up.
Put it this way, like in terms of like when I watched them in like Demacia Cup and going into the LPL, I could not believe how much better mechanically it was in terms of like just his ability to press the buttons. It was like a different player to Worlds. His understanding of like lane and what they're doing with like June looks like so coordinated and so planned, and you didn't see this on the previous lineup. I think Elk looks to be like one of the best like ADCs in like the region. He's so good at like front running right now, particularly on like the Lucian picks and stuff like that. Very, very impressive. The team is very bot centric, and Knight is going bot lane a lot to fight these 4v4 skirmishes that based on their picks they are based to win. Right now in the LPL, they've played the most games and beaten the most of like the like other good like teams. And the fashion in which they are like beating people is not even like funny. They don't quite have that GDG thing where any game it looks like they could come back into. Sometimes their team fighting can be a little bit disconnected, or the location of their team fights aren't as good. But the way they front run from like lanes, it's like either you stop the avalanche or the game's over. At like they're almost every game is like mathematically over at like 10 minutes.
Well, they had
So-
also like one of the best mid lane dives somehow one of the best mid lane dives I've ever seen kind of picked up. Where they try and dive mid lane with like a Jarvan, and like they end up both getting out on a single tower shot, and then also killing the enemy jungler when he walks up to them, despite both them being on like 100 HP. Like,
And then
if you give them an
executing-
option, they just explode the game. It's unreal the angles that they see.
Oh yeah, like they really are like impressive, and that was the thing. Like, I seen Tabby walked away from the team, and then in an interview he said he wanted to coach Knight to win Worlds, but then wasn't on BLG, and I was just like so perplexed because obviously there was like no reason given for why Tabby wasn't on the team. Like, but I don't know. Like,
Yeah, because
logic could be
Hom left because he had a kid. I don't know. I think if we ever like heard the reason for Tabe. Yeah.
And so like, you know, I read that, but then I'm looking at this team and I can't believe for a new group of players from like Demacia Cup to the LPL how coordinated they are. It's like impossible levels of like coordination of how well Knight, Jun, and the bot lane are all playing together. It's really, really impressive.
And I'll actually echo what Nymera said as well. The other reason I actually think for real, like when I saw this team made, I actually did just sort of think, basically, unless that Gen G team completely smurfs, this is the best team in the world. Like, this is going to be the team I'm probably going to pick to win Worlds as BLG. It's for exactly the reason you said, Nymera, which is they haven't even needed to actually have the carry top laner, but they've got the best carry top laner in the world sitting there, just basically like, can I play the game? Like, the joke is he is almost bored, like just sitting there like letting the game be won without him. So like, if it ever pivots to a hard fucking, like a bit like what Worlds was last year, where everyone was playing all the fucking crazy, just they'll be right at home. If anything, they'll just snap straight into that. And I think they'll be awesome. Because actually, that's the thing. If you notice, this is why this kind of not only is a super team, but it's even working out like one. If you notice, if you go through all the players, everyone's looking better. Pretty much everyone looks better, with the exception of Ben because he hasn't had to play. But like everyone else actually potentially leveled up or sort of shored up a weakness or something. They've gotten on the same page. There's another thing. This looked like a banger roster on paper. Man, in the server, it works even better. Who the hell would know that these matchups were what you needed? Yeah, it's incredible.
And there's a couple of other like caveats on here as well, like positive ones, as the extra considerations, which is, you know, they beat JDG at Demacia Cup, and most Demacia Cups have a huge asterisk on them, and this one had an asterisk because it wasn't Kanavi playing.
Yes.
But, like, there's a couple of monkeys that managed to get off the back because Elk had never beaten Ruler in a series before, did that in Demacia. You've got like obviously Knight ending up like being integrated into the team that way too, which is like a decent run of games with effectively full roster for them to go through that too. And yeah, I think that allowed them to get like a really good deal of confidence, because if you have that, like other Demacia Cups in the past didn't need you to have full rosters for LPL teams for and this year,
and the timing just means people often hadn't signed the players anyway, right? It was usually in the middle of the off season. Yeah.
So what they did this time is said that if you went to World, you don't need your full roster. So basically, gave like the teams which are playing the off season, like they had to still play like 3 out of the 5 or something. But like they still had to, you know, they had a bit of an allowance. But you know, this Demacia Cup is like one of the best ones you'll ever see, because most of the teams are actually putting decent rosters on the field instead of like full rookie rosters and stuff like that. And then also a thing which could have really worked against them in regards to like how quickly things were going to come off of the starting line. Typically, you only have about 2 weeks before Lunar New Year break in LPL. Now we've had about 3. And, you know, I think last year some teams had 2 series, some maybe had 3. Like, most teams have played 5 series before the break this year. That's like a decent chunk of the split. That's almost between a quarter and a third. The fact that they got everything working right here, right now, and still did that against top teams, like this is really looking like the fastest start that a super team could potentially have. Like they really look like they've understood things. Which is when I'd go back to saying, well, you know, they really nailed stuff like how they play around the map. You know, bot lane pushes in. They use the new tri-brush on red side bot lane to either dive or go into the enemy bot lane. Other teams just hadn't got that yet. And now it feels like they're really working around grubs really well too. That's something which LPL struggled with for the first week or two. It just felt like BLG, and the Herald as well. It really felt like this team, like all of the big rift changes, they adapted to the fastest. Which, given that they dropped a coach, which led them to really good success right the way from halfway through spring when Tabe joined, like. This is all like the highest possible role I could imagine for this team, which is very exciting, actually. I'm really excited to see what this team can cap out at.
I've got 2 things to say, and this is actually like, so there's like a property of like Tabe as like a coach in the LPL, where it's not that he like, as like a general, he actually like teaches you, and people who were under Tabe were able to like go forward and teach other people like League of Legends. As in like, he was not able to like just tell you what to do, he was able to imprint his like knowledge into you. So like for example, that could be something like Jun. You know, Jun is able to like hold like the ideas that like Tabi had around like the game.
That's why you're making it like that fucking, you know, if you give a man a fish, he can eat for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, he will eat for the rest of his life. Like, you're doing that with Tabi, okay? That's
yeah, but, well, supposedly that is like a proper like he like Uzi says it like he still was like when he was teaching Ming, he was literally like being like, here is Tabi, do what Tabi was doing. It's like the most ridiculous stuff like that, you know what I mean?
For those of you that don't remember as well, like Tabi was like a world's finalist back in season 3 or whatever as well. This guy's been around for a while, so he commands a lot of respect from the early days of LPL.
Another thing is, and I caveated it last time with you, Thorin, and I'll say it again. If you stick these players, like, you know, Ben and Knight as your solo laners on the team, the same way as if you have Knight and Ruler, I'll say it again. If you don't win everything, the year is actually like a failure. Like, I'm not saying it to be hyperbolic. Like, JDG last year did, as good as it was, they did fall short. Like, they didn't win everything because it was within their grasp. I hold BLG to the same standard because I hold Knight and Ben to those standards. If you stick 2 players of this caliber on the same team, like you really have got to just start winning like everything, or you have to start asking questions. You know what I mean? If you're not making finals, like something's went wrong. So you know what I mean? They're my favourites to win this tournament, like, you know, LPL, then go to MSI, and then we'll reevaluate from there. But they genuinely should be like going for something like legendary.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.